Hi, welcome back to Northeast Christian Church here on Brownsboro Road. I've got Melinda Jevedin joining me from Northeast Christian Church. You're the care pastor, which is a massive umbrella, especially with a church this size that does so much. You know, care is what you naturally do. So everything in my mind fits under the umbrella of your job description. But we're having a conversation, a real genuine conversation and candid one about mental health and how it has really presented itself from your seat in the world of COVID.
Yeah.
And mental health, I know, can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but over the past, let's say 18 months, I think that's a good benchmark for COVID at this point. How has mental health challenges presented themselves from your perspective?
Yeah, I think for those who had already experienced some type of mental health challenge prior to COVID, for a lot of people, this season of the pandemic kind of magnified that or brought it to light, whether they wanted it to come to light or not. But then I think the biggest surprise, which really shouldn't be that surprising, has been the number of new people who are experiencing mental health challenges who have never really felt that before, just due to the stress and the trauma that all of us are kind of walking through during this season of our lives. So just the unexpected.
And it's worth pointing out that mental health does not mean suicidal depression all the time. There are so many different layers that people can experience.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the biggest differences is prior to COVID, I feel like it was very almost had a label, like it's anxiety or it's depression or it's suicidal thoughts, where a lot of us don't realize that a lot of times the difficulty sleeping or the changes in our eating patterns or the increase in alcohol consumption, substance abuse, worsening chronic illness symptoms, a lot of times that goes back to our mental health, and sometimes we don't always make that connection. And I think that COVID has kind of, again, magnified and kind of allowed that to explode and multiply in a lot of different ways.
What about the sheer fact that we're having this conversation is, I think, a big step forward over the past, several years, because it's, I mean, myself, I struggle with anxiety. I have for years, but I never told anybody that because I was on television, but at the end of the day, I had anxiety because I was on television. And now you find a lot of people standing up and saying that and not being ashamed of it.
Yes.
And so I guess my question to you is, how has the conversation around mental health or mental illness changed, particularly in the time of COVID?
Yeah, I think if someone hasn't felt a mental health challenge personally, they know someone who has. And pre-COVID, I think it was more common to feel like you didn't know someone who was struggling in that way, and now everyone knows someone who is immediately affected by mental health challenges. And I think some of the research has shown that prior to the pandemic, 1 in 10 adults admitted to struggling with some type of mental health challenge, and over the last 18 months, that percentage has increased to 4 in 10 adults. So you think of any room that you find yourself in, and almost half the room is facing some type of challenge, whether they've been willing to admit it and bring it to light or not. And so just being aware of that and the responsibility that comes with knowing that that's such a pressing need right now is something that, especially as a church, we don't want to ignore. And as you said, I feel like the pandemic has truly continued to help us break that stigma and help us normalize the conversation about just being open and honest about what is hard and what's feeling impossible. Our world is so hypersensitive to everything right now, regardless of which side of so many different issues you fall on. Everything is adding stress and trauma to our bodies and to our minds. And sometimes we don't realize on the day-to-day just how much that's affecting us at home and in the workplace and in the community. And we just have such a responsibility to continue normalizing the conversation. You know, if I'm honest, the church as a whole, not just Northeast, but the church, big church in America has never been great about breaking that stigma around mental health. For too long, the church and the conversation that was had was just pray harder, just ask God to take this away from you. And that's, we believe that Jesus can be a part of that equation, but we believe that in most cases, if not all, it requires a lot more support than that. And so I think over the last little bit, we've seen church leaders willing to be transparent about their own struggles and normalizing getting help, getting professional help and medication.
That shows great presence to be able to sit there and offer some level, I don't want to say criticism, but an acknowledgement of where people can be better.
Yeah.
I appreciate you doing that so very much. When we come back, we're going to talk more about more practical ways to tackle mental health issues, and particularly how Northeast Christian is meeting that challenge. We'll be right back.